Welcome to another episode of Actually, You Can. I'm your host, Myth, and in this episode, I explore the subject of self-worth with the incredible Ashleigh Boehm. Ash is a nutrition and mindset coach on a mission to empower women with the wisdom and tools to rediscover their wholeness and come home to their body. As you will soon discover, self-worth goes far beyond achievements and external validation. It's an unwavering belief in your inherent value and worthiness, simply because you exist. Together, we explore how you can peel back the layers of your current self and reveal the authentic, vibrant person within. Ash shares her insights, experience with a few of her own existential crises, and practical tools to guide you on a transformational journey towards becoming the fullest expression of your current self. If you're sick and tired of repeating the same patterns, craving different results, and living a life that feels heavy, incongruent, and unfulfilling, then this episode is for you. Get ready to feel empowered to step confidently into the next chapter of your personal evolution, because actually, you can. Hi, Ash. Welcome to the show. I'm so stoked to have you here.
Thank you. I'm stoked to be here too.
And so before we dive into all things related to wholeness and self-worth, I'm keen to hear from you. Who is Ash and what is your current mission?
Okay. Wow. That is a big question.
Who is that? Just go straight into it.
I feel like I've had so many existential crises, and so it's really hard to pin that down. But in a professional sense, I am a nutrition and mindset coach. I work with women, predominantly around food and body, self-worth, mindset stuff. And helping them create more wholeness and coherence between the physical and non-physical aspects of themselves. So I guess that's sort of my mission as well, wrapped into one. A bit about my background. I was a gymnast growing up from a very young age. So basically a perfectionist by the age of 5 and really sourced my worth through performance and through my physical body. And that led me down a very steep and destructive path of eating disorders, which spanned well into my 20s on and off. That was probably the darkest period of my life. However, looking back on all of it and all the lessons I learned along the way, I realized that big wound, that big challenge was actually what created, my dharma, my purpose, why I'm here is to really help women source their value, source their significance in ways that are more authentic to who they are as a human being, not what they look like on the outside or what they can do for others or what performance metrics they hit and what little claps that they get. It's more about helping them source that from the inside.
And so I'd love to start by going to that journey a little bit more. I mean, it's really wonderful that you're able to make that realization that your self-worth isn't linked to the applause and all the external validation. But the truth is a lot of people, feel like as we get older, potentially we might not seek that external validation or we mature into ourselves and we suddenly just don't care what other people think anymore. And in reality, that's not the truth. We'll still care what people think if we have those wounds from earlier on. So I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey, delving into those wounds and coming to the realization that you don't need that external validation.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think like you touched on it there, and I hate it when people say that they don't care what other people think. And like to a certain degree, we can have that detachment from the opinions of others, which is really healthy. But at the end of the day, significance is a human core need. To feel valued, to feel important, to feel like we are contributing to the tribe is actually a really healthy core human need. And to be in complete denial of that is likely a suppression of that. And whenever we suppress anything, it kind of comes out in some really distorted ways, usually like projections or, emotional volatility. My journey was very much around, I guess, finding other aspects of who I am as a human being, not necessarily what I do. So who I am, my identity, my kindness, my compassion, my, I guess, my humor, like certain characteristic traits which are inherent to me as a human being that are always there regardless of how well I do or if I gain 10 kilos or not. Like it was really about like who am I external to everything else around me, or if my body changes or if I don't win at that thing or if I'm not fantastic at it and I fail, who am I aside from all that stuff, and how can I love every single aspect of me as well, even the bad stuff. So a lot of it a lot of my self-worth journey was very much acknowledging all my shadows, all my not so wonderful parts that I had suppressed and denied and projected onto everybody else and blamed everyone else my whole life and played victim. So there was a massive piece around really recognizing that it's okay to have all these parts as well, and really understanding that it's all part of the beautiful mosaic that makes up a human being, is the light and the dark, the good and the bad. But yeah, making sure that I was cultivating and growing different traits and characteristics that had nothing to do with my physical self, because I had to allow that to change over time as it did, especially with aging, which is a whole new thing that I'm like becoming very aware of now. So that's like a whole nother thing. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. I'm not sure.
No, it did. There's some beautiful things there. And now I'm going to tangent this even more based on what you said. So
Mm,
you've talked about finding yourself without the external. So I'm wondering,
mm.
how does the external world influence someone's perception of self?
Well, I think it's always, that belief loop, that feedback loop that we have. So even though it is internal world, um, influencing external reality, the external reality will always kind of provide a level of proof. And that can be really harmful, especially if you are being praised for something. And this is, I think, the trap that a lot of women get in with their bodies, and external validation, is that it is very addictive. It does feel really good. And when you're constantly getting praised for doing something or looking a certain way, breaking that cycle and finding yourself and detaching from that and finding other ways to feel good, it's not as attractive as just getting that quick and easy hit of someone like liking an Instagram photo where you look really beautiful or sexy or something like that. So, I mean, the external world can reaffirm those beliefs. I think also environment is really important. So the kind of places you're around, the people you're around, you either calibrate or you adapt the values of the environment in order to survive in the environment, and then you adopt the values of the environment to thrive. So if you're in an environment that isn't aligned with who you want to be or the kind of person you know what you are at your core, eventually, regardless, you're going to adapt to what's happening around you, because that's how you thrive in that environment or survive in that environment. So I think it's really, really important. Anyone who's on a personal development journey or anyone's on a self-worth journey, to really take a look at the environmental factors that are contributing to why you are the way that you are, how you feel about yourself. Like, how is your environment influencing that? And what environments can you put yourself into that are more aligned with the kind of feelings that you want to have about yourself, or other people who view themselves the way that you would love to view yourself, like surrounding yourself with those kind of people. So then your nervous system, your subconscious mind will start to calibrate to that way of being. And that's really going to help with the transformation. So it's really hard to um, make a big transformation, a big personal transformation, if your environment isn't supportive of it, because that's going to be your biggest limit as well.
And so, on that note, how would you know if the beliefs you have are ones that you want to have or are ones that your environment or maybe that you've developed over time? How do you know the ones that you have are actually ones that you really, really want?
Well, they won't be causing you any pain for certain. The way that I like to get to the root cause or a core belief that's not working is actually through looking at what's not happening in the environment, or what result is being created that you're unhappy with. So then you follow that back. So what's the result? What am I unhappy with in my life? Where do I feel like I'm at war with myself? Where do I feel unhappy? And then trace that back to what's the behavior that created this result. Then what are the thoughts? Oh no, sorry, what are the emotions that motivated that behavior? What are the thoughts that created that emotional state? And then if I'm thinking this, what must I believe about myself? And then I can find the core belief. So that's like a really quick and easy, like almost like McDonald's version of belief system kind of work. But if there's something going on in your life that is going really well, there's a positive belief that supports that. If there's something that's not going well, there's something that feels like there's tension. If there's a repeated pattern that's just not working for you, there is a core belief underneath that. And you just have to trace it back literally through that process. It can be that simple to figure out what it is, what's lying underneath it all. Yeah.
And what's an example of where that's potentially played out in your life? You mentioned before you've gone through a number of existential crises. I think someone who's passionate and really committed to a personal development journey will be able to resonate with that. So I'd love for you to share an example of how this played out for you.
Okay, so I'll give a couple of examples. So I used to have like big sister wounds, like a lot of sister wounds. I was a gymnast, so like all my best friends are also my competitors, my enemies. Then I was bullied a bit in high school, and that really impacted how I felt towards other women, particularly other groups of women, like groups, because I felt, yeah, that was very threatening to me. So the belief that I had was I don't trust women or women are unsafe. That's what I felt. I can't trust them. And then that created thoughts. So I'll give you how this played out in I joined a CrossFit gym. This was years ago when I first started this stuff. And I walked in and I was like, oh, there's all these fit, beautiful women over there. They're really cliquey. And I'm like, oh, they're not going to like me. They're going to pick on me or I'm going to feel excluded. And of course I did. I was excluded. Felt like they judged me and they didn't talk to me and blah, blah, blah. And it was just reaffirming my reality. I'm like, yeah, I knew it because the fucking women are bitchy and they're threatened by me or they just don't like me or whatever. But what was happening was that belief that I already had from high school created that thought process of I'm not going to be accepted here. They don't want me. I don't belong, which then meant that when I walked into the gym, my feelings would be like, I'd be nervous. I'd be shameful. I'd almost close off. So I'd like, okay, I got to protect myself because I don't want to feel vulnerable here because it's a vulnerable position for me. So that's how I would be. And so that's how I'd behave in the gym. I'd walk in, I wouldn't really say hello. I'd stick to myself in the corner. I'd work out, I'd hang out with the boys or whatever, but I wouldn't like socialize with the women. And then of course they didn't invite me to anything because not because they didn't like me, not because they're bitches, because of me, my behavior, the belief created this behavior that meant that I was not warm to them. I was trying to protect myself, but they were like, well, she doesn't want to hang out with us. So they didn't invite me to things. So when I kind of realized this belief, I collapsed it and, started changing how I felt and how I behaved and how I communicated and how my energy when I moved into that space. And before you know it, they became all my best friends. So it was kind of like this belief was dictating how I was moving into a space, which was then creating the result, which was backing up my belief. So, and similar things would happen again, like when I was dating and I had poor body image, same thing. I thought, I can't date until I've lost this weight. I was fucking skinny as fuck as well, which is like the craziest thing. It's like my body was like fine. It was like I was lean. I was like whatever, but it was a belief, and that goes to show that the subjective reality is not real reality. But I believed that at the time I was too fat to attract a partner. So same thing, I would go out into social situations. I'd be feeling those feelings of insecurity. I'd be shut off. I'd be kind of wearing clothes that would maybe cover me up a little bit more. Wasn't wanting to eat certain things. So I was just like socially not that fun because I was not feeling good in my body because of the belief that I had. And of course, no men were coming at me. No men were asking me out. No men wanted to flirt with me, not because I was fat, which was my belief. It's because of the way that I was responding to the environment, the way I was showing up, which then reaffirmed my belief. It's like, yeah, nobody's attracted to me. Nobody wants to talk to me. But it was really because I was just like being a weirdo, you know, or just antisocial. Or I wasn't being warm and open in myself. Like I was not embodied. And then that people can pick up on that. But yeah, the belief created that lack of embodiment. And that lack of embodiment was what made me repellent and not magnetic. So yeah, once I changed that belief, and my body has changed several times over the course of many, many years, and it's now doesn't affect the way that I move into social situations.
And there's a couple of things I'd love to touch on that. And firstly, thank
Mm,
you for sharing those beliefs, because I think, especially in the worlds I operate into, those are very two common beliefs that
yeah,
I see appearing with female clients specifically as well. And so,
mm,
firstly, I'd love to hear what made you want to collapse those beliefs. So, you said they came to a point where you collapsed them.
yeah,
What was that edge for you? You talked about pain before. What
yeah,
did that look like? And what was like, you know what? I'm fucking done.
yeah. Well, honestly, it all kind of came about really in one sort of big hit. I had, I'm not sure if you're into spiritual woo-woo stuff, but I had my big Saturn's return, which was that time of your life where you have like fucking hectic existential crisis and I was really questioning everything. And that's really when I started my personal development journey and when I started learning about this stuff. So it was almost like a point of, and I don't even know if it was massive amount of pain. Like I was in a lot of suppressed pain, but I was so used to being in pain that it was almost not acute. It was just chronic, and I just got to that point in my life, I think, and I don't know if it was planetary. I don't know what happened, but I was just about to turn 30. It's probably just that the pressure of what that means. And I just decided that I wanted to feel better. I knew that something wasn't quite right. So I knew that there was all these distorted behaviors. Obviously, I was like, my body stuff was really activated at that time, around that time, kind of got reactivated. And so I think having that reactivation of it was like, okay, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I can't go into my 30s feeling the way that I'm feeling. Like I'm too old for this. This has been too long. So it was, I think that milestone was like the trigger. And then I just started doing a lot of research, a lot of study, did a lot of plant medicine, all the bits, piled them all on. And then once I had the tools and I started knowing how to recognize it, I started to see my limiting beliefs almost everywhere. Like it was overwhelming because once I knew how to spot it, I was like, wow, there is a lot of stuff going on that is limiting me. And it was kind of scary and overwhelming. But I just started one at a time and I just took my time with it.
And you touched on a good point there. You mentioned that the milestone and reactivation of some patterns made you come to the conclusion, like, you know what, I'm done. I need to change
Yeah.
this. Because I think the narrative, especially in the personal development space, is often that you hit a rock bottom or the pain becomes so
Mm.
unbearable that you change, when reality, you can change in an instant if you really wish to. You just have to make that decision. So
Yeah.
for those listening, that's one of the key takeaways I'd love for you to learn from this is you can literally change whenever you wish. You don't need to wait for a significant event or some rock
Yeah.
bottom pain. You can literally make the change whenever. And maybe this podcast will be a catalyst for some people. Um,
Maybe.
and so you also mentioned before you collapse these beliefs. And so if someone's not familiar with this whole concept and they're like, how the fuck do you collapse a belief? Are you able to walk
Mhm.
us through what that looks like?
Yeah, so the process that I love to go through and, I change this up every now and again. Sometimes I do a really, really in-depth long one if it's a big, juicy one. But essentially, I like to sometimes I'll do that like reverse kind of engineering sort of technique, start with the endpoint and make my way back to the belief. And then once I land on the belief, I think it's really powerful to acknowledge where this has come from. Because when we can see where the root is or where this was instilled, then it can help bring peace to that inner child as well. Like I can transport myself back to the moment or the year or the time where that wound was created and that part of my that vulnerable part of my consciousness was formed and that way I can connect with that little girl as well. And if I want to, I can chat to her at any time in a meditation or whatever and provide her with what she needs. Um, but yeah, so I find out like where it was instilled and then I look at like how it happened. Because beliefs are formed and any patterns are formed through repetition or emotion or repetition and emotion. I'm like, was this something that happened once and it was really affected me in a big way? Like it really shook me up? Or was it something I was told or I observed over many, many times? So I just wanted to have a look at how it was created because the awareness and the consciousness already starts to loosen it a little bit because when you can see it like that, you like stops believing it's true and you can start to go, okay, so it's not necessarily true. It's just something that happened and I interpreted it this way or something that someone said a lot and maybe that was about them. And it just starts to like loosen my grip on it. And then I'm like, is this somebody that I want to learn from or is this like somebody like that I really should be believing what they say? And I just kind of start to pick holes in it, I guess, like take it to court, so to speak. Like if this belief was, if I was a prosecutor in court, how would I just rip it to shreds? How would I pick apart every piece of this belief? So I start to really look at evidence as to how it is untrue, um, which I think is really, really important. Then another thing I like to do is I break my beliefs up into if this, then that statements. So I think it's really powerful to not just look at the belief, but how the rules and conditions that you've created for your life as a result. So you can see the many different ways this plays out and the rules and the paradigms and the limitations. When we say limiting beliefs, we've got to go, okay, what are the limitations of this belief? Okay, if I do this and that happens, if I don't do this and this happens. And so I look at like on a very practical way, the many different ways that this plays out. Then I'll look at it like what it's costing me. So get really clear on the pain motivation. So what is this taking away from me? How, like emotionally, very tangibly, like what is this costing me? Getting really clear on that and try and go really deep in the pain motivation because we all know pain is like a very strong motivator. So I start to attach emotion to that as well in that process because emotion is how we can program. Um, and then I look at secondary gain. So what's the payoff? How am I still benefiting from holding on to this? And this is usually like the hardest part to come to terms with because it is, it's generally why we hold on to our limiting belief is because we're still getting something out of it on some level. It's meeting a need. So then when I ascertain what need it's meeting or what emotion this belief is helping me not feel, because it's either always meeting a direct need or helping you not feel the thing that you hate to feel the most, which will be somehow usually related to your core wound, then I pick an empowering belief or choose what I want to believe, something that's empowering, but not like ridiculously unreasonable or unbelievable. Sometimes it's got to be empowering and move you forward, but not be like out of the realms of reality to the degree that you can't possibly take it on because you don't want to sometimes just invert our beliefs, we want to also make sure that we can actually take that on as real. Because if it's too far from what we currently believe, I think the mind just goes like, like, no, not there yet. So pick an empowering belief, and then once I pick that, I have to figure out how to meet the need of the secondary gain. So it's really important that when our new belief, when we pick that, we also have to pick a way that this new belief takes care of the secondary gain, because until the secondary gain is taken care of, which is the secret and unconscious reason that we hold on to it, until that's taken care of, then that need is going to go unmet and we will recycle back to the old behavior and the old belief. So it's about, how do I believe this new thing, but also get this need met? And then I'll figure that out. And then straight away, it'll be like action. What do I need to do to integrate this? So what action can I do immediately and repeatedly? So now this becomes the pattern. And once you do that, then the belief starts to influence the result. And the action will influence the result, and the result will start to create evidence for this new belief. So it's almost like we're cutting in on the action-based level, which will then create a different result in our life. And then that will be like, okay, so I really, really do believe this. And because we're getting positive results, then that new belief is going to be instilled. I hope that makes sense. I don't think I've ever explained it like this before.
It's like you have this recipe to be able to do it and develop these really strong, empowering beliefs. And, when you list it out as you have it, it's like, cool, that's easy. And
Mm,
yes, it's easy, but it's not always simple. And so I
yeah.
think I'd love to, before we dive deeper into that recipe, I'd love to talk about core values for a moment. I'd love for you to run through what are core values. And yeah, let's start there and we can go further from there.
So values are like a meta filter. So they're like the biggest filter that we should, if we're doing it well, filter all our decisions through. Like that can be anything from what kind of jobs that we take, relationships we engage in, food that we eat. So it's kind of like this big filter that we utilize in order to allow things in and keep things out. It's almost like a sort of like, yeah, a filter. That's what a filter does. No shit. Um, yeah, and I think one of the biggest challenges that people come up against, and this is what I recognize, is when people are in a really icky place in their life or things don't feel well, it's because they're meeting a core need in a way that is out of alignment with a core value. So core needs are things that we all need. Core values are like the standards that we hold for ourselves. They're the things that are the most important to us, and they really help us, align with other people and opportunities to make sure that that's a right fit. So I think they're so important, because if you're not filtering everything through your core values and you're not aware of your core values, you literally just take on anything and everything. And then you wonder why life feels shit. It's because you don't have that filter and you're not really solid in them and you're not living through them. So I feel like that's one of the biggest challenges that people have, is complete values misalignment, but it's because they just don't know what their values are.
Yeah. And the reason I was keen to hear you speak about core values is in the terms of limiting beliefs. What could be a limiting
Mm,
belief for someone might not be a limiting belief for someone
yeah,
else because they have different values, right? And
really.
I see very similar with my clients is people don't know what's important to them. They know what they don't want, but they often don't know what they do want.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to hear how you go about supporting people who come into your world to find out what their core values are.
Yeah, right. So I like to go through a process of first drawing into awareness where they're currently spending time, energy, money, and what they talk about. So looking at what they currently value. So what we value, we give our precious resources away to. And so sometimes people will say that they value one thing, but then when you look at where they're actually giving time, energy, and money, or conversation, or their language, it's completely different. So that's where you can see where people are out of alignment. So I just first see where they're at as far as what they're currently valuing, irrespective of what they say. And then I just ask them the questions. And I like to do specific values around different things as well. So you can have ones that are like more generalized, but I think it's really healthy to do them like relationships, work, like different things. Cause like what I value in a romantic relationship is not what I value in my business. Very different. So I kind of like to look at different areas of life and see what people value. But if we're doing an overarching one, I kind of get someone to almost like visualize when they feel good or when they felt their best, and get them to drop into that emotional experience of feeling really at peace, really aligned, and looking at what the different aspects are that are going on there. Like what are they doing? What are they valuing at that moment in time? Or where are they? I almost can do like a bit of a meditation sort of situation, drop them into a moment where they felt the best and kind of picking up on the key aspects. Or you can just do like a sort of like chunking up sort of exercise as well. And just ask the question, like, what's important to you about this? And keep asking and asking and asking until you're able to extract those core values, and then um, do a bit of a process of getting people to rate where they are in regards to the embodiment of that value. So if you were living at a 10 out of 10 in alignment with this value, what would you be doing? What would you be believing? If you're at a 0, what would you be doing? What would you be believing? And where are you right now on that spectrum? And then helping them close the gap between the number that they're at and what that 10 out of 10 looks like. Because when you can get them to visualize the standard or the upper, like the 10, then you know what they're working towards. And it's very clear. Like, if I'm valuing health, what do I believe and what am I doing? And where am I now? And so then you can actually very tangibly close that gap and create strategies and plans of action to move someone along that line a little bit. But you kind of also need to get to the beliefs around the values, I think is really important. Yeah. So it's like understanding, if I was at 10 out of 10 in this value, what would I be believing about myself and about the world? Because that's going to be the block of embodiment. So someone can do all the things to try and be healthy, but if they have a limiting belief around their ability to implement that strategy, then they're not going to be able to become fully healthy, are they? Or they're not going to be able to embody that value. So yeah, that's the sort of process that I like to go through, which is like a million processes right into one. But the way I just described it, complex.
And I think that's why it's so important if someone's sitting here going, I have
Mm.
no idea what makes me happy. I feel disconnected from something, but I have no idea what it is. It is a process. And I'm sure you didn't wake up one
Mm.
day knowing how to go through this process. It's a result of years of study and commitment to this. And so I think
Yeah.
for anyone who's looking to dive into this work, know that it is a bit complex and there are people out there who can support you through it. And I'm interested to hear from you. How have you ever experienced yourself a values misalignment and how did that play out for you?
Oh my gosh, yes. That's like literally half my life. um, I mean, I think a lot of mine came from, I guess, having a really incongruent external image to what was being experienced internally. And that felt like a massive values misalignment. So, for instance, health from the outside when I first started in the fitness industry, I was in a very disordered position with my body. I was like chronically dying, like obsessively counting macros, but then also like teaching women how to love them, like how to be empowered, just in where I was in a completely disempowered state myself. So although the value that I was projecting was health, and that's what I spoke about, the misalignment with what was really going on behind the scenes was like actually really ate me up inside. Like, it created a lot of anxiety. But that was meeting my core needs for significance. So it's like I needed to feel significant, and I also needed to make money. So I was getting money, but then I couldn't. I was completely out of alignment with this value of health and also authenticity. So that's a massive thing that is really important to me and something I've really grown into over the last few years. But there was a very long time where there was a massive incongruence between who I was externally and who I was internally. And that was values misalignment on all levels. There was nothing there that felt aligned. So yeah, that was a really hard thing to come to terms with and even talk about. But I found that the more honest and vulnerable I was and forthcoming I was in telling people what had been going on for me, that started to close that gap a little bit. And now, the embodiment piece is there. So definitely the health one. That's always been my external image. But I was like drinking, partying, going on benders, always up in the background, not really talking about that. Yeah. So lots of that going on. What else? Probably a heap. Not so many recently, but I'd say that would be the biggest one, is the incongruence between what people saw and what was really happening.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note too is even though you might be misaligned to your values, you can still operate. It just doesn't feel good. As you mentioned, you were earning an
Yeah.
income off supporting women to feel empowered and feel good about themselves when you mentioned that you weren't potentially doing that yourself in the
Yeah.
background. You can still operate misaligned to your values, but it just feels shit.
Yeah.
So I need to
And
understand
you'll
what
be
do
limited. You're
yeah.
like, your is always gonna be, like, capped because you're disembodied, and, like, you will sabotage because there's a part of your consciousness that's like, "This isn't right, you're gonna get exposed, like, people find out, you're gonna be in fucking trouble." So you stay small and you keep yourself really, really, really tiny. But yeah, like you said, it feels icky, it feels yuck, it feels like a bit forced, like it doesn't flow. It does feel like you're almost like pushing shit uphill, like you're trying so hard because it doesn't feel natural. Yeah.
And so what are some values you have about health and how are you living more congruently with them now?
Hmm. They've changed so much. So much. Um, I think now my values around health are much more holistic. Back then, it was very much just about the food that went into my mouth and, training and all that kind of stuff. Now, I think my values around health are much more about balance, much more about gentleness, slowness, like almost, yeah, I guess never haven't thought about this for a long time. I think health as well is not just the physical body, it's the health of your emotional state, it's the health of your inner landscape, it's the health of your mind, your environment. Like, how is that set up? Is that healthy? Is it supportive? Is it nourishing? Is it clean? All these different aspects. I thought health was just a very physical thing, but for me now it's extended into just every single part of my life. My relationships, I'm always checking if they're healthy. So yeah, it's very different these days, but in regards to the health and fitness specific, it's much, much, much more balanced, much more relaxed, like way, 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 way more, and less about how things look and way more about how they feel. So health to me was always about how healthy I looked or how people might look at me and assume. But now it's about like, how does this feel? And that looks very different from the outside than it did before. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your body's changed over the last few years, and no doubt as a result of this process of coming to that values alignment. And so, what have been some different versions of your physical body and what's contributed to what they look like on the outside?
Yeah. Well, it's really, I've like always been muscly. So I've never lost the muscle. I haven't been training that much recently because I have a back injury. So I'm like getting a little bit softer, but um, the actual physical changes has been really interesting. I feel like, and this could be completely subjective, but it doesn't really matter. I feel like the last year, not this one because I'm got injuries going on, but I think in my mid 30s was when I felt the best. Like I felt like I looked the best. And that's when I really stopped punishing myself. I actually got naturally pretty lean, like not with trying. I'm not dieting. I haven't dieted in probably 6 years or so. I haven't tracked a piece of food in just as long. Like it's just not a thing for me anymore. Um, and when I let go of all that, and this is something I wholeheartedly believe, is that we think that we need to change our bodies in order to be who we really are and to like, we always have to alter our bodies to be our best self. But I find that like when we grow into who we are or we are our most natural self, our most authentic self, then our body will follow that and it will find its most natural place. So instead of trying to constantly control the body, I just stopped doing that and started focusing on being more authentic. And then my body found its most authentic place, which happened to be somewhere I was really happy with. Like my whole life, I was fucking terrified of letting go of food rules and training like a maniac all the time and controlling every single aspect of my body. I was so scared that if I let that go, then I would just become, blow out and become morbidly obese and, all these catastrophizing thoughts. But the exact opposite happened. The moment I let go of the need to control everything, my body settled into this really comfortable place that felt really good. And I felt so confident. And yeah, eating felt pleasurable and enjoyable, training, there was no pressure if I wanted to rest, like it was a completely different paradigm. So I think these days that's been the best change is wasn't actually much of a change. It's more about how I'm relating to it. So physically, I don't really look that different to be honest, just how I feel, which I'm lucky for. That's very genetic though. So
Yeah, it's
yeah.
interesting because I feel very similar to yourself. Like, I can't remember last time I weighed
Mhm.
myself. I've been nourishing myself in a way that feels good and is aligned with my
Mhm.
values. I've been training in a way that does the same, and my body just stays consistent at the same. That also aligns with my values. Like, I feel like I'll always be fit and athletic because a lot of the things that I value are aligned with that as
Mhm.
being a result. And so I'm interested to hear if someone was to say, "Hey, Ash, I'll be happy when I lose 5 kilos." What would you say to that person?
I'd say no, you won't, because projecting happiness onto an external result. I mean, if the reason you have gained 5 kilos is because you have not been yourself or you've been using food to like, suppress emotions. And in the process of healing that, you lose 5 kilos, you may be happy for sure. But having the perfect body will never make you happy. Letting go of the desire to have the perfect body will 100% make you happy. And that's the thing, like the 5 kilo weight loss doesn't change how you feel about yourself at all because you're just projecting inner low self-worth onto your physical body. And I think that's the biggest challenge and it's so sad that we do that, is we use our bodies as a punching bag for all our internal unresolved emotional pain. And we think that we can change the outer side and the external, and that will heal everything internally because we're just going to feel so much better about who we are. But it doesn't. It doesn't make any of that go away. And I know it. It was like 15 years of my life. You know what I mean? Like I thought that, after this diet or when I get to that, everything's going to change. All of a sudden, I'm going to love myself. And it just never happened. It never came. And that goalpost kept moving and moving and moving. And yeah, if there's one thing I can say, it's like, that's just not it. It's not it. Like change the part of you that thinks that that's going to be it and you'll be happy.
I mean, and why the fuck is it 5
Mm.
kilos for everyone? Like, it's always been like, "Oh, we have to use 5 kilos." Why is 5 kilos a magic number? Like, who even made up this shit anyway? And
I think because like 10 will probably be too much for a lot of people and like people just like random numbers. It's just so weird, isn't it?
yeah.
But I mean, I get it. Like since we were little girls, diet culture has been in our faces. I remember my mum eating like a bowl of Special K at dinner because she had to eat differently to the rest of us. She wasn't allowed. All these kind of like little subtle messages that we're picking up on when we're little girls. And of course, we're going to grow into women who feel like we have to shrink ourselves all the time to be acceptable. It makes sense, but we can't play into that anymore. Yeah.
Oh man, I think that could be a whole nother podcast of just
Mm.
we have so much more access to information now that someone thinks you need to eat a bowl of Special K for dinner to lose weight and be healthy, then we can debunk that in 2 seconds. But
Yeah.
for lack of tangenting, just that one too. I'd love to hear from you. You mentioned the dieting can be a result of poor self-worth. I'm interested to hear, what
Mm.
does self-worth mean to you?
Hmm. I think it's just like, so self-worth, they say it's like your degree of self-worth is how big that gap is between your idealized self and your actual self, your perceived self. So we all have the things called the three selves, and we always have an idealized version of us. And then we have who we actually believe that we are. And your self-worth will be determined by that gap that is there. So the quickest way to feel better is to just stop idealizing this version of you and to actually see yourself as more valuable than maybe you are giving yourself credit for, and also letting go of this fantasy of who you think you should be and who you desire to be and this ultimate version. It's not to say that we can't improve and want to do better, but if our idealized version of self is unattainable or just like way, way, way too far removed from who we perceive ourselves to be, then we're going to feel like shit. So it's about like, giving ourselves a little bit more grace and appreciation and love for exactly who we are in this moment. And then also not expecting ourselves to be like this perfect person all the time, because that's going to make you feel like shit. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful way of explaining it. I've never heard that before, and I really appreciate that. And so I'm interested to hear then, if someone has really big goals, how can they still feel good about themselves in the journey to achieving those big goals?
Mm. I definitely feel like a good strategy of like breaking things down into smaller goals as well. So you continue to give yourself reward for things. Like I think having big goals can often put people in a state of paralysis, and they start to try and solve the problems, or they project themselves too far in the future with the resources that they have right now. And then we get freaked out. So we're trying to solve big problems. We're trying to like figure out how we're going to get to that big goal, but we don't have the lessons and the learnings that we would have picked up along the way in order to achieve that goal. So I think it's always good to hold it there, but then set yourself up small milestones along the way that seem more achievable and more likely. And then just be willing to openly adjust and pivot, take on new information, change your mind, not be so rigid in how that needs to happen and what the path looks like hold the vision, but allow the journey to kind of take as long or as fast or like however it needs to unfold. Is just be okay with it going off in a few different directions in order to get there. But I think from a very strategic point of view, breaking it down is really helpful, because then you stay motivated, you stay encouraged, you feel good that you're kicking goals along the way, and you keep it kind of realistic. But I think also having like people on your team, a mentor, a coach, someone who can resource you and give you what you need to continue to move through those milestones as well. Like don't try and go at it alone. Because that's when we get in our head, and that's when we can self-sabotage, and it can also feel quite lonely as well. So yeah, getting a coach or a mentor, or even having somebody or a group of people or a community that are on the same path as you as well is really, really powerful.
And something that I hear often as well, especially women who are in their sort of mid-20s coming up to their 30s are like, I want to develop more confidence. How
Mm.
is self-worth linked to self-confidence? I hear people use them interchangeably. Are they the same thing? Are they different? And if so, what are the differences?
I think confidence is more like I don't know, like an expression of self-worth, if that makes sense. I think self-worth is very much how we feel. I think the confidence is very much how we express that or how we embody our self-worth. I think that shows up as confidence a lot of the time. So yeah, I've never actually really thought about that. It's an interesting question. Yeah, I don't know actually. What do you
Yeah, and to be fair, it was just as you're speaking about it because, self-worth, I think is to your point, how you feel about yourself potentially because I work in the external and the results, I feel like
Mm,
people develop confident in that space. So maybe it's an internal versus an external. You become confident in a specific skill set where
yeah,
self-worth is more the internal, how do I feel about my actual self rather than what I'm
yeah.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think you're right. So confidence comes from competence, and competence is more like having like an ability or a skill, and competence comes from repetition. So I feel like you become confident in something when you are competent in that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just trying to think about how that would play out. Like someone walking into a room feeling really, really confident. But again, I
Yeah.
guess that's just the practice of holding yourself or becoming competent. Socializing. I don't know. That's a really great question.
Well, I'm now wondering, I would say, would self-worth be a precursor for having confidence in something? Like, would you need to have a high level of self-worth to be able to eventually feel confident? Or can you essentially be confident in one thing and still not feel overall worthy of something?
Yeah, totally. I think you can be confident just through competence. That's what I mean. Like you can be confident in I can be confident in my ability to drive a car, but I can be feeling like I want to like die while I'm driving it, Like so I guess it's confidence is more about an ability, I suppose. And whereas self-worth is just an inherent state of how you view yourself or how you perceive yourself. I think it's more just about your general regard and acceptance and love that you have for yourself. And I think confidence is more specific to certain things, actions or behaviors.
Yeah. And so I'd probably
Yeah.
encourage anyone who's saying, I want to be more confident, go, cool. Do you want to feel more confident or do you want to feel more worthy?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of people who can portray confidence, but it's also a mask. Like a perfect example of that. People would have never known how much I like hated myself, because I portrayed confidence. I think you can fake confidence. You can't fake worth because worth is like an internal experience of yourself, whereas confidence is like the externalization of that. But I think we all know that people can wear masks of confidence without really being it. So, hmm.
And so how would you know if you felt worthy? How would you feel in your body if you were worthy? Or how wouldn't you feel?
Yeah, I think for me, and this is the big thing, it's been really about how I treat myself in the moments where I've let myself down or I've fucked up or I've failed or I didn't do as well as I wanted to. It's that those are the moments where I really know where my self-worth is at and how my internal dialogue is and how I am talking to myself and how I behave as a result. So I think a lot of self-worth is self-compassion and just like acceptance. Acceptance, massively like huge piece around unconditional acceptance of like no matter what, I'm still worthy, I'm still valuable, I'm still lovable, even if I missed the mark or that wasn't great or people are disappointed in me. I think it's the conversations I have with myself in those moments are really determining like where I'm at as far as my self-worth and how much I'm valuing myself. Yeah.
And so is the word failure part of your vocabulary?
I mean, it is, but that whole thing of like, there's only lessons, no such thing as failures. Yeah, definitely. But I'm not afraid of it either. And I think the more that we even try and frame it so much that we don't want to think of anything as a failure, we're like cushioning ourselves and buffering ourselves from the fact that failing is okay. And sometimes I've like, there's obviously a lesson and a learning in every single failure. But I'm also okay at failing now. I don't have to always be like, oh, but I learned all this. I can be like, yeah, I can fail it. That was shit. Suck. I did learn this, but like, it was all right. Yeah. So it's kind of, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's like such an important part of the process of growth, of growing. Like failure provides feedback. Feedback provides, more learnings, more lessons, like how you move forward. And you got to be so comfortable with failure. You got to be so comfortable with feedback. That's been one of the biggest lessons for me is learning how to take criticism, learning how to take negative feedback and like just yeah, sitting with that and being able to hold that experience in my body and just being okay with it. And also, yeah, admitting to people when I failed.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear an example of that. I definitely think feedback, even the term feedback, if you hear it like in a work situation, like, "Oh, I want to give you feedback on your work," the first reaction is probably going
Mm,
to be, "Oh shit, like there's something wrong with it," right? Like it's very rare that we're
mm,
like, "Fuck yes, feedback. I love this." And
yeah.
you can get to a point where it is like that. But for a lot of us, I think because we feel vulnerable and exposed when someone wants to offer us feedback, I'd love to hear
Mhm.
what your experience with feedback and how has it changed?
I mean, I used to never really ask for it unless it was positive. So now I make
Mhm.
any like an effort to always be asking about it. And I think it's like constant and instant feedback is the best way, especially if you're in a relationship. This should always be one of the core tenets of your relationship. Constant and instant feedback. As soon as someone does something that upsets you, in the moment, communicate it clearly, move on. So that's something I've really tried to cultivate within my coaching relationships, like within my friendships and my personal relationships, is like just giving people the space and the permission to pull me up when I'm being an asshole or I've overstepped the mark, and like have that conversation with me. And the more I get used to it, it's not such a big deal anymore. Like you just get familiar with that feeling of getting feedback. And then you start to, and because I've worked so much on my self acceptance, if someone says that to me, I'm like, okay, yeah, I take it on because I know I'm not perfect and I know I have these certain traits that are not great, but they're usually because I have the opposite trait, which is great. So it's like we can't have one without the other, like the shadow and the light of the trait. So if I'm going to be praised for one thing, I'm probably going to be criticized for the shadow aspect of that trait, and that's okay. So I think just cultivating that culture within all my relationships has been really powerful, as a way to just like not make it such a big deal. It doesn't have so much weight to it anymore. Um, and just asking for like how can I improve? How can I make this better? Yeah, and then just being okay with hearing that.
Yeah, and you mentioned that feedback is also linked to growth, and
Mm,
I find it challenging. I'd love to hear what your experience is, but anyone who's dedicated to personal development too, chances are that you change, you
mm,
grow, and you evolve, and how you just show yourself to the external world, how you appear to others in relationship can grow and change as well. And I think for me personally, I think especially when you're in business and your business is you, that your
mm,
business can grow and change as a result of your growth and evolution too. And I used to be
yeah.
like, oh, but what are people going to think? Like they go, she used to be doing this, now she's doing this. And oh my God, now she's doing this again. And what is going
Mm,
on with her? And I've kind of come to this place now where I'm like, at least I'm growing and evolving. That's my business. I'm in
mm.
the space of personal development. I fucking hope I'm growing and evolving, and you're all witnessing that. And so I'm interested to hear your experience with growth and evolution, especially being in a service-based industry and in your own company. What has that been like for you?
Oh yeah, like that's been one of the most interesting things. And I have the exact same experience. I have like pivoted and gone in all these different directions so many times. I used to have feel like a lot of shame around that. Like, oh my God, like people might be perceiving me as like, what is she doing? She's so confused. She's so all over the place. She hasn't got her shit together. Like I was concerned that was what was being perceived. Whereas like you expressed that when you are very deep in personal development, you're constantly peeling back new layers and new layers. And with every new layer, there's different beliefs and values that come forth, and almost like a new identity is rebirth. So of course that new identity is going to want to take a different path to the old one. And so that's what it kind of looks like from the outside. It looks like this flip-flopping all over the place. But the experience for me has just been like this full on, it's not always like a straight line. That's definitely not it. But there has been, yeah, lots of kind of bringing things back in and going in different directions, then merging those paths back together again. And for me, it's always felt like a forward movement thing. I don't feel like I'm chaotically lapping around. But yeah, I've always been like, I guess, concerned that that was the perception from the outside. But I've just been true to myself the whole time and honored my path, because if I didn't, I stayed too consistent with one thing, then chances are I've outgrown it and I'm holding on to that out of safety. And I'm spiritually, mentally, emotionally over here, but I'm talking about this. So I'm kind of disengaged. And it just didn't feel right for me either to be coaching around things that I don't want to talk about anymore, where I feel I'd outgrown because it's safe. Um, so I did make a big pivot a few years ago. um, I was very much health and fitness, very dieting, aesthetic focused, like lots of fat loss stuff, like always putting up heaps of photos of my ripped and shredded body. And then I went to South America and did like a heap of plant medicine, had a massive existential crisis, got flipped inside out. Basically realized that was the moment where I had to start changing what I was talking about, because I was doing more harm than I was good. And that was really scary to face that, but then also not know what it looks like and if people are going to want to follow me, because I had a huge following, well, not huge, but big enough, based around what I had been doing the whole time, and to honor myself and to make that pivot and the risk of losing all the people that were there for me for that was scary, but I felt like I had no choice. I'm like, I just have to honor this. Otherwise I'm going to get really depressed. And it was really surprising how many people were ready for that transition themselves. They just weren't aware of it because they were looking to certain people for guidance and advice, like myself, and we were feeding them the same stuff. So the moment that my messaging started changing, I started opening up to new ways of thinking and relating to myself and my body, there were so many women who were just like, oh my God, thank you. This is what I need. And so it was actually very reaffirming. But there's always that fear of making changes, especially in your business, that people are going to not want to come along for the ride. But I feel like the right people will always find their way, always, as long as you're speaking from the place of what feels real for you and you're being authentic and you're feeling inspired and they're feeling that energy, they're going to be open to receiving it.
And how beautiful is that, that you're like, you know what, I'm showing up as me and I've done all this work to keep peeling back the layers to discover what that is. And people still showed up for you and really supported that. That's beautiful. And so I'm curious, if you were to go back and have like a 60-second phone call with the Ash who's just come back from South America going, fuck, things just need to change, what would you say to her?
Mm. Oh my gosh. I think I would just be really reassuring. It was a really scary time, feeling like it was a massive identity crisis, massive. So I think I would just reassure her a lot and tell her that, the fear and this chronic feeling of anxiety and this massive void that I'd been sitting in after that was a beautiful part of the process of just letting that identity die. And that's what it feels like sometimes. It's like a massive death, and that's scary. But I tell her that like the best part is yet to come. It's only going to get better. So follow it. Yeah.
And so if someone's listening to this going, you know what, I'm done, something needs to change, I'm just not
Mm.
feeling good about what I'm doing, what the really actionable step that they can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start getting them, whether it's a bit more in line with our values or just feeling better about themselves in general?
I think just taking a really good look at the different aspects of life and doing a bit of an audit as to like, where am I right now in life in these things? So that can be health, relationships, money, career, um, whatever different aspects are in your life, and just getting really clear on like what's really going on with me in this aspect. Where do I want to be? Where would I like to be? And then what's kind of standing in my way? Like what's really stopping me from getting there? And just doing a bit of a life audit, because if things aren't looking good, aren't feeling good, sometimes we think the problem is this, but when we're looking at the holistic, you know, life as a whole, we can actually recognize that sometimes what we think is the problem is not the problem. That's the symptom of something deeper. So I think just get really real, do like a bit of a exercise around awareness of what's going on. And I think I always, and I obviously I'm a coach, so I'm going to recommend this, but I feel like if you're stuck, find someone who can help you get unstuck. Because if you had everything you needed to get unstuck, you'd be getting unstuck, but you're not, because there's something missing. Either your mindset, you can't see things clearly, you're stuck in your perspective, or there's a lack of skills or tools that you don't yet have, because what you have has gotten you here. And if you had what's going to get you to that next phase or where you want to be, you'd actually be moving in that direction. So just be honest about what's missing and what you need. And if you need help, go get it, because people really avoid, especially I think it's a money thing for a lot of people. They avoid investing, they avoid spending time and resources on outside help because they think they can go at it alone. But if you could, then you would be, but you're not, because you can't, you need the help. So people will um, try and save money, but waste time. And time is way more precious than money. Way, way, way more precious. You can go months and years and stay in the same place and really fucking regret that. Whereas money, you have an ability to manipulate that to a certain degree. You can save here, you can spend here, you can make that work. It's a bit more like we have more control over our financial situation, but time wasted is gone. It's never coming back. So I think, yeah, just being really honest with yourself about where you're at, what's going on in your life, doing like a bit of an audit and just get real fucking clear. And then if in that what's in the way section, if you don't have the things that are going to help you move past that, then you go get help. Go get someone on your team and just, yeah, move through it, start taking action, start getting out of the situation and become happy because, yeah, we all deserve that.
Beautifully said. And I love how you finished it off that we all deserve it because we do. And it's understanding that you're right. Like if we don't have the resources currently, it's completely okay. And I'm sure you've had thousands of mentors just as I have who have supported us through this path. And, it's been
Yeah.
worth every penny. And thank you also for sharing all your wisdom and all of your experience with us. I've gotten a lot of joy from it and there's a lot of value in there for the listeners as well. So thank you for being so honest and open about your experience. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
And so if someone's keen to learn more about you and work with you, how can they find you?
So the best way to connect with me is through Instagram. So my handle is at Ashleigh Boehm _ so you can find me there, and then all my other contact details are through there as well. So that's probably the best place to go is just through Instagram. Yeah.
Perfect. And I'll drop everything in the notes below too. But thank you again so much, Ash. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today for another episode of the Actually You Can podcast. I so enjoy having you here, and I hope you've taken away powerful insights and tools that will support you to achieve your high-level results. Now, before you go apply all of this wisdom in your life, I would be so grateful if you are able to leave us a podcast review on the platform that you're listening to, or share this episode with a friend. Your support means that we can help more self-led, high-performing individuals just like you expand what's possible for them. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on today's episode, so please go on and shoot me a note on socials and let me know what you think. You can find me on Instagram at MiffGalloway. Now, go ahead and make those dreams a reality because actually, you can.